Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to welcome my co-host, Commercial Solar Guy, to the show. Welcome, John.
Hey Tim, how? I hope everything's going well. Haven't seen you for a few weeks. I was on vacation. I went to Australia. You were asking about it. I saw solar everywhere, rooftops all over. It was cool. Even had my girlfriend telling me, "Hey John, solar," because I just say the word solar out randomly when I'm driving in the car. Probably annoys my girlfriend, but so be it. But now in Australia, she was going solar, 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 because I was driving and I was scared to hit cars because I'm on the other side of the road. So I'm like super zoned in on my driving, and she's pointing out solar left and right. It was pretty cool. Yes.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the penetration of solar in Australia is much higher. I don't know what that statistic is, but it's at least 3x what it is in the United States. And there are various reasons for this. And it's funny, John, because I talked to somebody in Australia, gosh, like a year and a half ago, and he was like, here's the secret. We build really cheap, crappy solar in Australia. So I don't know. The soft costs are half of what they are in the U.S. In Australia, the soft costs are cheaper. And equipment, you can imagine the equipment's not traveling as far to get to Australia either, right? It's coming from China or Southeast Asia, and it's a short hop across the whatever that strait is called to Australia. So there's a variety of reasons, but and they're also geeks for solar technology, right? With New South Wales, isn't it? The University of New South Wales that does a lot of R&D.
I'm going to put something else as the biggest driver for why their residential solar is so well priced. And
Okay.
this was based on, premonitions and held priors that I've learned slowly over time. But on our last day, we were in Sydney. We were walking on this cool beach, and then south of it is this beautiful set of rocks, and it's just very picturesque. And it was like all rainy and stuff and windy, so it was just everything was cool. And we girlfriend went into the water and met an electrician. Just started talking with him as a couple. Guy does more O&M. His wife helps with the office, brings in deals, does other things, and they don't do solar, but they did. Specifically, he'd done solar. They weren't a couple then. Nobody cares about this on the show, but that's the human touch we bring here, Tim. And so I asked him. I said, "Hey, have you ever done solar?" And we started chatting about it, and he said, "Yes." And I asked him to verify. I said, "Hey, when you do a solar project, can you really just show up the next day and install?" He goes, "Yeah, of course." And you install right away. And you plug into the grid right there. And you turn it on. And then you fill out the paperwork afterward. And so, Tim, if you could show up to a business tomorrow and start installation, and it would roughly work, and there'd be no issues with it, how much different would your sales process be? How much less paperwork would be necessary if you were...
Well, I mean, you're talking about shortening this one thing, and that is basically the permitting. And that would be a good thing, right? We get bogged down in interconnection in the commercial solar space. We get bogged down in interconnection because
Interconnection?
going into it, you don't know what the upgrades are or not that the grid operator is going to require, and that
Yep.
can be a deal killer, right? They could say, well, you need to upgrade our wires between here and there, and that's going to cost $1 million. And you go, well, the whole solar project's only $1 million, Mr. Grid Operator. What the heck? And so anyway, if are you saying that you can just do this? You could just build a solar facility, and then the interconnection study happens after the fact?
When you speak about a large commercial project, I am certain that there would be some limitations. I don't explicitly know anything,
Yeah,
but I know that in the residential world, you literally install the very next day.
sure.
You walk in,
Yeah.
and if you're really a good fast company and your install team happens to be trailing behind you and you're the first sale of the day, you might have like, yeah, the team is literally trailing me, hoping I close a deal, and bam, install team shows up. Maybe that's not very efficient business to run there, but
No,
that's
I
the
mean, I
you
I
have
do
no
think,
all the team gets squished. Everything gets squished,
yeah,
and That's a lot of cost of carrying people for 90 days and keeping payroll running for 90 days. I'm sure it's cheaper in some way, great, but solar's cheap anyway. Solar's meant to be replaceable. It's expensive and has to last 30 years when the cost is three times as much. If the cost is a third, hey, maybe slightly less over engineered solar is better.
There's definitely more efficiencies if you can ease the permitting process. It's going to make the overall installation more efficient, and it will lower the soft cost. There's no doubt. It is interesting that the DOE's program to expedite permitting in the United States is struggling. Um, and I don't know the gory details of that, but
Yep,
part of it is how we have given local jurisdictions a ton of authority in the United
yep,
States.
it's
We don't
true.
have anything close to centralized authority making or decision making when it comes to the grid. We have local authority, and that's a problem because those local authorities are like God, and those are cities and towns and counties, and then the grid operator is also like God, John. And I wonder, is that different in Australia? Because that is clearly antiquated. Like every solar and storage professional in America understands this, that our grid operators have too much control. It was a good thing when we didn't have electricity, okay, and you needed standards, etc., right? That monopoly, that regulated monopoly model, but that model is completely antiquated, and clearly the grid operator is not willing to change fast enough. That's why we have NEM 3.0 in California, and we killed the residential solar market in California. Like, go figure. Like, it's one step forward, two steps back.
Well, something about that. I don't know. Obviously, I'm a vacation Australia expert.
Yeah.
As I was flying from Melbourne to Tasmania, somebody on the airplane said, "Hey, how are you liking your travel?" I said, "Well, I'm biased because I've specifically chosen only to go to beautiful places. Thus, my perception of Australia is that all places are beautiful." And a lady in front of us laughed. She goes, "Thank you so much for saying that about Australia." I'm like, "Oh, it's great." So my bias is obviously showing, but or my low information. But there's the larger projects. There's a much tighter cost structure. Utility scale in Australia is cheaper than U.S. utility scale. And no, Tim, you mentioned it. I didn't see any of the accordion solar installations in Northern Australia because I wasn't in the Northern Australia state. I was in Queensland, but which is northern area of Australia.
Well, I'm
But that's
glad you brought this
rainforest.
up, okay,
Yeah,
because there's a couple of things here. You're talking about 5B. Check out
5B.
5B.
Yes.
Check out 5B. They're a factory installed ground mount racking system where the panels are installed on the racking in a factory. Then they're folded up. It's like an accordion. It's an east-west system, and it's very low to ground. There's virtually no racking, right? The panels are just held together, and they're pre-wired in the factory. And then you drag a container out, and then drag this stuff out of the container, and it unfolds onto the landscape. You end up with a very high ground cover ratio. A couple things though. I'm an advisor to Luminous Robotics. Check out Luminous Robotics. They're targeting module installation for the tracker, currently for trackers, which is 94% of ground mount solar, utility scale ground mount solar in the United States. And then I'm getting all these data points though. PEG is increasingly popular. There's a new PEG competitor called Planted. I had PEG on the show. I haven't had Planted on the show, but Planted is explicitly using robotics for module installation also. PEG is a very low to ground. They use rebar as racking. So it's like 3 feet off the ground. It's an east-west system, very high ground cover ratio. Great in the Caribbean, for example, where you have high wind loads. Um, and and so but the data point that I really love about 5B, John, is that AES has partnered with them. They have formed a joint venture, and AES is one of the largest or the largest utility globally. They're a very large global utility. They operate in Latin America, in Europe, in the United States, I think even maybe in Asia. But anyway, they were developing their own solar module installation robot that looked like a Zamboni. If you know what a Zamboni is, are you an ice
Yep.
skater
No, but
or
I know that Zamboni is just a big
hockey
square
player?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this big square truck that cleans the ice and smooths the ice, right? Well, they had developed a robot that, it had a big stack of solar modules inside it, which is why it was built that way, I guess. Anyway, Luminous is taking kind of the opposite approach. They have a small vehicle. It's like a small tank with a robotic arm attached, and they're just building their first prototype. So it's still very early days for Luminous as well, but they're going to expedite the module deployment onto the racking system, basically replacing one or two humans, um, maybe more, and getting more racking installed in less time. And then you have Terabase, which is doing this pop-up factory. I don't know if you've learned about
I've
that.
seen that. I've seen
Yeah,
that.
where they install the torque tube, the modules onto the torque tubes in a
I like that
pop-up
idea.
factory.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool idea. That's interesting.
It is interesting, and we're waiting for some official feedback from Terabase and companies involved in that, how that's going, because they've been kind of quiet about it, but they do have a large scale project underway. So anyway, I like robots. I know that you do too, John.
Yeah, I mean, now you have me thinking about like the coolness of bringing a factory out into the field and then doing a key chunk of the assembly with people where the machine is brought to them and they have their tools and their gear and everything. And ta-toon, 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 ta-toon. You still get the fine installation hands of a rested person in a non-dusty atmosphere, doing a consistent twist. Everything's getting a torque. You can like account for every single bolt having its torque properly done because, if you have a little factory setup, and if the torque tightening of your modules and your components and your wires, etc., is the number one risk for fire or wind, because that's what it is per my light reading, and you can get a in-factory torquing, I bet you can get better insurance costs, or at least better production, lower O&M costs. Man, that's a cool idea. I would love to ride in a factory in the field uh, installation system. Man, that would be so sweet.
It's a good experiment. We need to do lots of
Yep.
experiments. That's my approach. Do lots of experiments, small scale experiments, and don't assume that you have it figured out until you get it done in the real world. That's the challenge, is the real world. It's easy to do this in a laboratory or in a warehouse, but in the field, conditions are very different. And that's where the Mike Tyson quote comes in, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And
Yes.
that's what field construction is. It's getting punched in the face by mud and rain and terrain and gophers and who knows what. Right.
Gophers. Gophers. Gophers, man.
But I'm about to have just a data point here also on this racking stuff. I'm going to have another racking company on the show. I'm going to have several racking companies on the show because I'm a geek for racking, called Cambridge Energy, out of England, appropriately. Uh, Interestingly, the CEO is Australian, but they're targeting to compete with 5B by doing factory installation of the racking system. It is a portable tracker designed initially for the mining and remote construction industry. So you set up you install the racking just like 5B in a factory. It gets containerized and then you ship it to the site. You pop it up, and then you have a tracker that is not permanently anchored with driven piles, but it uses these toggle bolts and cables that are driven, and they're considered temporary because then you just snip the cable and you can pick it all up and move it somewhere else. So this is interesting that they think that there's a big enough market for this to actually create a technology to disrupt the tracker market. So we'll see.
Well, okay. So in Australia, a perfectly great solar power project that was 7 years old, which was 2 years older than its prescribed lifetime, was decommissioned at an Australian mine. So it's a mine, not a mine. It could have been a mine. There were many mines working there, Tim, but it was an Australian mine
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, and they decommissioned a 7-year-old plant. And some people were like, oh no. But then the others were like, that's awesome. The project met its needs. It was valuable. I'm sure I can even find the article if you tell me. And it met the numbers. It got its job done. And that plant, I'm certain, was decommissioned by people who resold the project and now have a perfectly functioning solar plus storage with diesel generator hookup. Or, if they're really smart, Tim, they're doing what this guy's doing and they're redeploying the power plant somewhere else. And I don't know. So that's pretty interesting. Redeploying systems and having that value.
Yeah.
People have been trying to do that with shipping containers for the longest time. Deploy a city, deploy a office, deploy a home, deploy a solar power plant. It's a model. I see it every once in a while. Cool drawings for factory deployable solar.
Yep. Yeah, we need more ways to make solar affordable. That's the bottom dollar here. Is we're trying to drive towards 1 cent per kilowatt hour solar energy, which makes theoretically green hydrogen economical, splitting hydrogen with an electrolyzer, into oxygen and hydrogen. And that's something that companies like Terabase are very focused on, actually. And that's a good focus to have for society. Cheaper renewable energy is going to be good for society. So maybe we should get into some concrete stories, though, about this, right? The energy transition. I found a story in PB Magazine this morning. Let me see if I can get this on screen. I haven't done this in a while.
Grid enhancing technologies, a dream for energy developers. I like this. I like it.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about that acronym GETS, but Grid Enhancing Technologies, a story by William Driscoll in PV Magazine USA here. And it says PJM could add 5.5 gigawatts of renewables with grid enhancing technologies. And this isn't complicated. That's one of the things that I like about this, John, is it's kind of staring us in the face. It's saying, yeah, we have this grid. It needs to carry a lot more juice. So what could we do to make the grid carry more juice instead of having to build a whole new grid and add a bunch of wires and poles, right? And the answer is things like smart conductors, next generation smart conductors. When you're carrying thousands of volts, apparently there's different ways of constructing the conductor. And one of them is to make the core of that hollow, for example. But conductors have changed over the last 100 years. We don't just use the same exact construction of the copper wire that we used to use, right? And by doing so, you can get that conductor to carry a lot more energy. And so reconductoring the grid doesn't require building out new infrastructure, right? It's just putting new wires on the existing towers. That seems like a brilliant idea to me.
The only negative of this is that we can only get 5.5 gigs of capacity. That'd be great. And it's even better. It's not just 5.5, it's 5.5 in PJM.
In PJM, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the cost at that price, developers to deploy $7 billion of solar, let's just say that's 7 gigs of solar. If it were that dollar amount, we know it's not. Would be 0.1. So 0.1 billion on 7 gigs that's going to be like what, 2 cents a watt, a cent a watt. We'll go 1.2 divided by 7, 1, 2, 3. That's 1.428 cents a watt, Timothy. It's not children's money. It's $100 million, but it's on 7 gigs of solar. Developers would love the opportunity to have that sort of technology. But this is only going to squeeze it so far, it seems. This is 5.5 gigs. We have 2 terawatts, 2,000 gigs in the queues ready to go. Right. And that's probably going to go to 10 to 20 terawatts before the game is done. So this is a good Band-Aid, but we need a global HVDC. And global could just be super east-west, north-south on North America or the United States. All of those would be great. But these are good Band-Aids. These can get us 5 gigs for $100 million. Slam it.
Yeah, I'm all for this. It's not the sole answer, of course, and but it's an important upgrade, so to speak, to the approach, and it's going to save money and time, right, for getting clean energy deployed. We need to triple the grid because we're electrifying uh, transportation, heavy industry, and HVAC. Those three things, basically, right? We're going to triple the amount of electricity we use, and so we need a more robust grid. And part of the answer is grid enhancing technology. So thank you, William Driscoll. Good story.
That's his thing. Will really likes to touch on technologies that enable greater stuff. And if you scroll through Will's article history, he's written a lot about enabling solar inverters in residential projects to be a big part of the grid. And California's researched this a lot. Sunrun is probably an expert. Sonova is probably an expert in this. And Tesla as well. But I would, Sonova has put some smart stuff out there. Sunrun has been doing it for a while, and get yourself a Sonnen battery, and I think you could have a pretty cool grid run house with today's gear.
Why do you like
Maximizing.
Sonnen?
Sonnen is my favorite home battery technology, just because they've been around so long, and they were having batteries as a VPP before the word VPP was VPP. How's that?
Yeah, I would agree there that they are forward on the VPP. It's interesting that that brand has kind of fallen, though, in dominance, so to speak, in the U.S.
Yeah,
it
Tesla's local, you know.
Yeah, I think Franklin has kind of burst onto the scene in a big way, I would say. Solar Edge. I mean, all of the inverter companies now have their own storage products, which I think is, makes sense, right? They already make inverters. You need an inverter when you install a battery. But
Listen, Sonnen is priced stronger than the market was for just a solar plus storage item. It was a premium item from a German manufacturer. And they were big and cool before everything exploded. Maybe they'll always be a niche product. Maybe they'll always be European. Shell bought them and then sold them.
right.
So
Why on earth would Shell sell a battery company?
they're trying to figure out a mineral play. They're trying to figure out a way to extend their expertise, and they're trying. They want to spend some cash, but the returns on investment of oil are just so high that they keep. I think, in my light readings of them, the return on
Yeah,
investment of oil is so high that to
yeah,
buy normal hardware manufacturing products in a world where China is complex in their game, not looking for just return on investment in
yeah.
manufacturers, it's very challenging to be a manufacturer of solar components and be financially viable these days, which is in all of our benefit. Nonetheless, it's challenging. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm cool with it. People investing in hardware, different conversation.
All right, let's move on. You found
All
a
right.
story in Canary Media written by your favorite author, Eric Wessoff. The biggest solar plus storage project in the U.S. came online. What's the story?
Well, I mean, it's just a big project with multiple pieces put together, I believe. Technically, you got this story, Tim. So
I
hopefully you
did?
know the better
Oh,
details. Yeah, yeah,
it is a
I
good
do.
story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now you got to scroll
it's
down
a
a little
little
bit for
dated
me.
now, but this story happened in January, and they installed 2 million solar panels made by First Solar in
Yep.
from Ohio, right? American
Yes.
solar panels, one of the few true soup to nut solar panel manufacturers in the United States. That is changing. Q cells will be the next to flip that switch, I think. But um, and this is in Kern County, where a lot of big solar and now storage projects are happening. Batteries by LG Chem, Samsung, and BYD. So many batteries that they had to use three different flavors of battery, which
Well,
says a lot.
well, it's a little more complex. This project is being built in phases, isn't it, or is it not? I believe there's multiple phases in this project, and Each facility.
875 megawatts of solar
Look,
and
so the next paragraph. This is what interests me most about this company, and I'd like to learn. The project provides power to more than 10 customers or off-takers, utilities, cities, and it's complex. And then there's multiple phases where it's being built. And so I'm wondering if these phases have to do with the battery or if it's, just how this project's come together. If anything, the financial patience that was put out by this group when they developed this is amazing. And one thing that I think is super interesting about this project is I think this group started building everything and developing it on their own with their own cash, knowing and believing they had a customer coming for it. Like they put out a pitch that they were going to try to be a merchant solar power plant. And they talked about it. And maybe they got a bunch of PPAs before they finished because people started calling in on them really hard saying, hey, I see you got a plant. Let me come buy some of your electricity. And they're like, I'll sell it to you for a premium in this scary market when inflation's high, something. And it's a cool project. It's, yeah. Thanks, Eric, for writing it.
yeah.
Did you see Eric visited, in his Twitter account, he visited the Auxin solar panel manufacturing facility in California?
Recently?
Yeah, very recently.
Oh.
Last month or two. Could have been month or two.
They've written about that, historically too, right? But
Yeah,
what's the update?
Oh, the update is that there was a what do they call when they stack modules on them? A pallet. The pallet had moved across the empty, desolate, grass-strewn, rat-infested back porch, and that absolutely nothing was happening in the Auxin facility, Timothy Montague.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Because that's very important. So
It's
anyway,
what's bizarre about that company is they have a partnership with Nucor, the huge steel company, to provide solar panels for Nucor, what Nucor calls a solar structure. So let's talk about this story, which is
I got all kinds of stuff. I got all kinds of good
blog,
stuff.
I guess.
Yes. Well, this one's on my blog because I couldn't find the original source image. I know who made it, but
Bloomberg
I might have.
increases. Let's see what the story is, though. Bloomberg
Yeah.
increases solar projections to 575 gigawatts deployed in 2024, a 30% jump over 2023. Okay.
So that's the image is really all that matters. It's just a big pretty chart with a big pretty number, 575. And 575 is a really big gigawatt number to be deployed in 2023 or 24, pardon. And
Right.
it's based on 444 being deployed in 23. So that means we globally grew from 52 to 44, which is like 70%. 252 minus 444 equals divided by 252. 76.1% growth in 24 or in 23 versus 22. 252 to 444, massive. And
Yeah.
now we just popped another 30. In private conversation, it was suggested to me from Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, Jenny Chase specifically, that the whale number, they have a range of expectations. Their upper bound is like 675 gigs. And 675 is, I don't know, it's just a big number. That's our window. That's what I'm optimistically sales pitching myself into, that we're going to be above 600 gigs. I also saw a projection that says if we hit 600, we're following a trajectory that's really massive. So, it's that one. So if you click on that article right there in the bottom link right there, this is an article I wrote for PV Mag. And if you scroll down a bit, you're going to see a chart that starts at 600 gigs. So that's Bloomberg. Earlier this year, they were at 413. That's our growth. That's exponential. That's the IEA. Keep going. Here, you know what? Scroll up real quick. The IEA says 600, no, down one image now, down three. One more. The IEA says to meet global warming goals, we need 633 gigs a year. We could, hypothetically, meet the goals that have been set out for solar power from the IEA's perspective to be useful to humanity in electrifying and cleaning electricity this year. 6 years early. solar could be pulling its weight, so to say.
What is the
So
blue in this graph?
wind.
Okay.
So there's that. Now go to the next chart. This gentleman, you, and a part of a very smart group, the DR Dahmer Financial Risk Management, and there's a university involved too. They put out a good paper. Says that if you look at that 2024 number, that's actually 600 new gigawatts being deployed. And if we follow along that path, that leads us toward almost 4 terawatts being deployed in the year 2030, which is like, this uber growth projected that's constant exponentially doing 30%, 40% a year. And 600 is just a cool number. If we hit 600, we got that IEA thing, we got this little projection. These are the things that excite me at night, Tim. I like to think about solar projections. So,
Yeah, I'm with you,
all
man.
right. All
I
right.
mean, the energy transition is a very good thing. It's a feel good, and kudos to all the energy professionals who are doing this lift on a day to day basis. I'm here to be a catalyst and help you guys go further, faster, basically, right? And it's very important. We have to keep in mind that completing the energy transition, getting the economy to net zero, okay, where we're not adding CO2 to the atmosphere. Today it's at 420 ppm. In 1970, it was 300. So we have to remember that net zeroing is important, but it's only 40 gigatons of pollution that we're taking out of the economy. There's another trillion tons in the sky. So I want my visionary energy professional listeners to really focus on that. How do we get that trillion tons out of the atmosphere in parallel as we clean the grid? Okay. And Peter Fikowski is my shining light so far. He's the dude who's done the analysis and written a lucid conclusion, which is ocean iron fertilization and permaculture of seaweed. You do those two things, basically growing massive amounts of biomass in the ocean that then let sink, and it gets stashed there for thousands or millions of years.
I've seen that a few times talked about. I'm
And I,
interested in experiments.
yeah, yeah, there's some small experiments being done with OIF, ocean iron fertilization. Mount Pinatubo is the great example of a natural experiment that was done in the 90s. Mount Pinatubo exploded. That's a volcano in the Philippines, and CO2 levels globally flatlined because of all the iron that Pinatubo pumped into the ocean. So it works.
There's also the other experiment that we're doing on ourselves. Shipping. We removed sulfur from ships, and now the regions where there was heavy shipping, North Atlantic, I believe, is one of the places that are constantly talked about. We're seeing the North Atlantic anomaly, which is the temperature of the ocean, increase faster because there's no sulfur in the atmosphere
Mm,
blocking. And so the pollution was giving us a temporary respite, sort of kind of hiding its effects
yeah.
of climate warming by saying, you know what? Well, not really. It was just literally blocking light. So I guess the pollution was doing one thing. In order to like hack at you one way and cause climate change in one way, it also slowed climate change in another way. So it's very interesting the way the atmosphere works. It's a Yeah. So yeah, pour some iron in the ocean if that works. If we have a cheap way to hack and do some cool solutions, please
Well,
let's rock on.
that's the amazing thing about Fikowski's analysis is it only takes $1 billion to $2 billion a year between now and 2040 to remove all of that trillion tons of carbon. Oh, hey, Chris Letman, good to see you, and Mark James, good to see you. Um, but but anyway, check out peterfikowski.com. We'll move on. And you should be careful in the doc, John, about ordering things now because we're not going to get to everything, which is our common problem. But
Yeah.
let's talk about this story by Ryan Kennedy. I mean, this is really good news. Solar and battery storage make up 81% of new U.S. electric generating capacity in 2024.
Yes.
That's a really impressive statistic.
Yep.
Like, you see this just staring us in the face, right? The opportunity has arrived. The energy transition is happening at a pace. But what's the story?
This is a report from the EIA, and it projects new capacity being deployed in the country in 2024. And there's actually a net negative on fossil fuels because there's coal and gas that are coming on and off, and I wrote an article separately on that. But this is great. So this is solar on the AC side, and this is only utility scale. So 36.4 gigawatts AC, 43, 45 gigawatts DC, and this is batteries, gigawatts, and probably half of that is 4 gigawatt hours, maybe 3/4. The other big chunk is going to be Texas, which is 1 to 2 hour. So maybe this averages 2.5 hours. So 45-ish gigawatts, and already what exists in the U.S. is like 15.5 gigawatts of battery. So a really cool thing, look at December, like when everything's coming online. But a really cool thing is that we're almost going to double the already deployed capacity of batteries that are in the United States. We're almost going to double it in 1 year. So we're going to take all of existence and we're going to go, okay, let's double it. Ba-dunk. And that's this year.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. I mean, California is already doing awesome things, but they have a massive trough of cheap daytime electricity. Batteries are about to change what can be thought of as is possible with batteries. California's CAISO power grid is going to pound, man, and I'm going to cover it next week, but I'm reading the publication out, and we could cover it on Utility Dive. California just approved a 2030 plan of like 55 gigs of new capacity, and there's going to be so many batteries that are going to hit the grid hardcore that we're just going to see the daytime thing in California evolve very quickly, very differently. As the battery pundits have been saying, is where I think it's going to roll out. There's going to be some nuance, but as the battery pundits have been saying that batteries can eat the daytime duck curve. We're going to now see the results of the cooking. Right now, the pot is being bubbled. The projects are already signed. They're being deployed. They're in the EIA. High probability of being constructed. This is a high probability. So we're in the midst of the transition happening this year. And the next article, and I put these in order for you to pick them, Tim. So I was conscious of my article ordering. I care about our show, Tim. We got to take care of our people. We have hundreds of subscribers to this show. I think you said over 500. That's kind of cool. But in the United States, we're going to see over 50 gigs DC of solar being deployed. At least 8, probably 10 gigs of small scale, and 43 to 45 DC of utility scale, as we just saw. And that's just straight solar. We're breaking 50 gigs deployed this year, Tim. And that's sort of floated under the radar. The most the United States has ever deployed, is like 60-some gigs of capacity in the early 2000s. We're going to pass that next year. This year, we might even touch it. You never know. We could get a little squeaky commercial, industrial, residential bounce. Who knows?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we did 33 gigawatts last year, right?
Yeah, 18.6 utility on the AC, which is probably like 25 DC, and like 8 residential commercial. So yeah, 33, something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. So this is a healthy clip up, this prediction going to 45.
45 utility.
Yeah.
We doubled. The IEA says that we're doubling utility scale capacity this year to next. And that's pretty cool. And that's it right there. You can see it. You can see in the 23, you see that light green, and you see in the 24, the light green that's forecast. Yeah. This is the same chart, just a couple weeks earlier than Ryan's. I was looking at the document when it came out. Ryan saw the EIA press release. But that's utility scale going from like 18 gigs to 36. That's doubling. That's pretty cool. And then at the bottom, you can see the coal and the gas that's retiring. The coal is the black, the gas is the brown.
Yep.
So 50 plus gigs, dude. We are in the midst of a growth phase.
All right. Well, that's. I hope the IEA is right. I'm. We got to make the transition. All we need to do, John, is deploy the technology that we have today. We don't need major innovations in solar or wind technology, and we have the technology. We just need to get it in the wild, and we can completely net zero the economy.
I think
And
so.
we just have to remember, net zeroing is not the answer. It's not the holy grail. We could have
Got more.
runaway climate change with a net zero economy, right?
Could. It's happening.
Yep.
We got to take some out.
All right.
All
What's
right.
next?
You want to just
Are
see
you-
a pretty picture? It's very
oh,
easy to just
you found
click
a
it and
project
just
of the week.
smile. It's just pretty.
Wow.
Very pretty. Yeah, see? Look at that. See? I can't even see it, but I just saw your reaction. Everybody, it's a good, pretty picture.
That's
It's a good
really
choice.
cool.
You got to like this. Yeah. The
and-
half-cut modules aren't real. The half-cut modules aren't real. They shaved them up or something. I don't know the exact process. But it
sure.
was shared on Twitter, and there it
This
is.
must be in Europe because it's
Switzerland,
in
I
German.
believe. Yeah, it might be Switzerland. I'm not positive,
No, it's not
but
Swedish.
it's church. Well, Switzerland isn't Sweden.
Where? Oh, sorry, Switzerland.
Yeah,
it
it's
might
different.
be Switzerland.
Different Germanic tribe.
Where is this project?
Yeah, I looked at some of this stuff. I chatted with the person on Twitter, and when I shared their image, and they got if you translate it to English, somewhere there's gonna be a button for English for us non-speakers of the tongue. But it's just pretty. Look at that. They filled up the whole thing. They, in Europe, I've seen that they have a different roofing construction structure. They have this frame that's laid out in wood, your roof structure, and their framing, instead of laying wood planks on it, they're allowed to lay the solar panels right on the wood planks, and the solar panels become fully the roofing material. And so you don't have to build a piece of wood and then a layering of various materials to build up to your roof. Yeah, so check that out. That was the before.
Yeah.
This is a cool structure. I like the angle. That roof is a little eaten up. All right. Now go to the after and let our fine folks bing. And of course, they have the bright sunlight, so they pick the best day to show the after. But it's really, the structure looks better with solar. And that's what I said. And when I initially retweeted it, and everybody was like, you know what? It's not even real. That's a computer image. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And
It is better looking with the solar roof. I have to agree. So they're going from probably clay tile to solar, and I look forward to this kind of roofing integrated solar solution coming to the United States. It'll be 10 years, but it'll get there, and it's a good thing. So thank you. Good project of the week.
yep,
I wish I could tell our listeners where we found that story, but I could not interpret any of the information on that. So, c'est la vie. All right, we got time for a couple more stories. RE Plus.
Sorry, Tim, I didn't see you there. I was coming back from my vacation. I was exhausted, and I'm a terrible communicator. All of that.
I went all the way
should've
to Boston,
responded.
and I did not get to see John Weaver.
I
That
know,
was
I'm
the
sorry.
only disappointment from the trip. I had a good trip myself. I didn't actually get to go to the show floor after it was live. I had to leave the day of the opening to go sail in a regatta in Florida. But
Come on.
I came in on Sunday, on Super Bowl Sunday, and was there all day Monday. I took a wonderful workshop with PKD, Peter Kelly Detweiler, on hydrogen and green hydrogen. So
Cool.
we're going to be having PKD on the show in the coming weeks. I think in about a month we're going to have him on the show to talk about that. And but you went to the show and you saw
Yes,
some concrete.
I saw some. It was a cool ballast system. Um, it was concrete. It's. I asked them for a bid for product because we have a couple of roofs that we're looking at, and I just thought the ballast was kind of cool and creative. We get rid of all these metal components. We do have these heavy bricks, and you have to have the right roof that can deal with it. And maybe they can make some smaller ones that are lighter and more refined in the math. But yeah, I
So
think it
you
was
saw
cool.
the story is called "On the Floor at RE Plus Northeast 2024: Concrete racking, no caulk needed, basketball and more." What's the deal? Tell us what you saw and what is this racking system?
Scroll down one more picture, and what I saw was
Ah,
coolness right there. The only metal piece are the clips that hold the modules down.
yeah.
That's it.
And and why is this advantageous?
Well, for a lot of roofs where you don't do a penetration and you have an available collateral load available, that's a weight pounds per square foot where you can put some stuff on your roof.
You have such an obtuse way of describing this.
Yeah,
You're replacing the ballast blocks with a a block-based racking solution,
yeah,
right?
okay, that's cool. Yeah, a lot of people don't know what ballast means. So the bricks holding down your solar are now also holding down your solar.
But is the system overall the same weight then? So you go from 6 pounds per square foot to 6 pounds per square foot. Is that the value proposition? And you're using less metal, and therefore it's cheaper.
All those things combined. Concrete though is a expensive product.
It is.
Shipping, moving it. Well, it's not like super cheap, but it is cheap. It's relatively cheap. Aluminum's cheap too, but there are some costs associated with it. Moving it, it's pretty heavy. It's the same as moving the ballast, I guess. But yeah, I just like it for simplicity as well. It's fewer components, like massively fewer numbers of components.
Yeah, it says it reduces the use of aluminum by 95%. So that's cool.
Well, I wrote that first off, so you know, but
That was your
because
assessment?
that was my guesstimation. Yes,
Okay.
yes, because there's literally one metal component. It could be more than 95%. Could be like 98.
Yeah.
So I like the product. It's cool. It's just it was neat. I just thought it was cool. That was it. So this is and if you go back up to the top image on the article, scroll all the way up real fast, you'll see the leftovers when Solar Recycle rips apart solar panels, and that's
Yeah.
what I thought was neat. Silicon, plastic, copper, glass. Those are the four main components. That's like 98%,
Hmm.
99%, 96%, something like that. Some big
Yeah.
number is that right there. And so I just thought that was cool. I stacked them all close. I took a very artsy picture so you could read the top. And
Yeah. And most of that can be repurposed into new solar modules.
absolutely, absolutely. That's the way it works. So some ballast was neat. That's a racking material, a racking attachment. You attach the leg to the roof. You start drilling in the lag bolt, which is what holds the L foot to the roof, which holds the panels. And instead of you having to squish stuff under there, this puts out some sort of non-hardening material. It's probably like what my editor was saying, bituminous. Just like roofing material, just like shingles, and
Yeah.
it goos down into the roof.
Semi-liquid sealant.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so it's a way to uh, modify the standard practice for this is for mostly residential, right? Sloped shingle roofing. Um,
Sloped shingle. I did a 100 kW sloped shingled roof recently.
yeah, but I don't get it. It's like
It just saves caulking. It saves a step. It automates a particular step of the process, and
okay.
make sure you have good material on every leg going down in there. I bet you this would work really great if you could put it on top of a wood roof, or not have to go through the shingles, because then you could really seal it perfectly. So this is a mid clamp, but a mid clamp that sits between rows. So you have a big long row, and between each module you have a mid clamp, and then at the end you have an end clamp, and that's how you put them together. But this is designed to sit between two rows so that the row above only needs one rail to hold it down. So instead of having two rails to hold down each solar panel,
Hmm.
he wants to sit in between two big chunks of panels and let the top rail skip a rail. And the product's called Skip Rail. And so it's a mid clamp project that sits between modules and connects two separate rows together. So you can skip some metal and skip a whole bunch of attachments to the same roof. So you can knock down your attachment
Why didn't
volume
someone
by
think of this sooner?
wind. That's my logic, and you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, this is just, I'm a little mind boggled that is this really a thing, or is this
yeah,
pushing the boundaries too much,
maybe,
or
maybe.
um,
That's a good question to ask, yes, sir. That's smart. Yep.
skip a
So
rail? Okay,
skip a rail.
and then we're looking at what here? Anchor Solar.
So the main Solix 11. The
Anchor
main
Solar.
reason I posted this is because Anchor is kind of new in big batteries. They're a gadget company that makes awesome connectors. You
Charging
just tons of
cables.
yes, very good at making things. And I read an article on them, and I was very impressed by them, by their owner and their logic and how they modeled their business structure. And I was like, wow, all that sounds like a good, solid business. And they also do batteries now. And so I was like, oh, Anchor, they make big batteries. They used to make little batteries, and I've bought their little charging units prior, and they always seem to work well. So,
Yeah.
so it was just cool.
So
I
they're
was like,
getting
look at
in
that.
the resi battery space
Yep,
with the lithium phosphate. Is it not
lithium
lithium
phosphate.
iron phosphate?
Well, it's not lithium, cobalt, nickel, which is
Right.
what it's not that. And
Yeah.
I don't think I guess it's an iron phosphate. Maybe that's what
Must
they
be
all are.
LFP because that is the most common form for, you know,
Yeah,
that's the most common chemistry for stationary storage.
probably. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. And that's what I assumed it. So, this is a company that will come out and do some quick scans of your hardware, and their specialty is saying, hey, we looked at these solar panels and they are good or they are not good, and here's
Mhm.
why. And they give you a deliverable that you can use in a discussion with an insurance company, or if you have a conversation with your module manufacturer and you get some modules that look a little funky. And you're like, hey, I did a spot checking of modules, I found these. And his story, and I liked it, he said, listen, once the module buyer knows that you have a guy like me showing up to go through each module and spec it out, then they work really hard to give you good modules. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. So
So it's an EL imaging service.
yes, he
Yeah,
takes pictures.
and EL stands for what?
Electroluminance, I believe.
Yeah. So it's a standard test that you want to have done, usually in the factory, honestly, right? Uh,
Probably.
to pick out modules that are defective. And but so are they using like machine learning or something? What is new about their service? Because there's many companies that provide that EL scanning service.
I don't know. It was new to me that he was doing it and that he existed
Yeah.
and that he was at RE Plus on the floor.
Oh,
That's what that was. I just thought it was cool. Yeah, we got 240-ish booths, and I walked by, and
yeah.
that was my cool learning conversation. Maybe it triggered in me because I bought modules and I had 4, 5, 6 I had to replace. A couple that were manufacturer defect. No, a couple that we think were manufacturer issues, and a couple that we know were ours. So it made me think. And then what he said is the importance of a clear module acceptance provision clause in your
Hmm.
contract. If you're a big buyer, you know this term, but you need to have a good module acceptance provision clause in your contract. So thought that was
Yeah.
interesting terminology to learn. So it was a good conference. I liked the conference, and I don't know. It was small. It was I could consume the whole thing in one day. I was only there for a day.
I heard there were 4,000 people,
Yep.
um, which is a good number. These regional conferences keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's cool.
I like the regionals. We have three regional events. Let's talk about events, John.
Sure.
We have three regional events in Chicago this year. In May 20th to 22nd is the Midwest Solar Expo. If you'd like to sponsor the expo, reach out to me. I am securing sponsors for the Midwest Solar Expo, and I also am working with the Illinois Solar Energy Association on recruiting members to that organization. So if you're interested in working in Illinois, reach out to me. But then in July, we have the Solar Farm Summit, which is an agrivoltaics conference organized by Mr. Bell. And then we have RE Plus Midwest in November. So three major conferences in Chicago this year. It's a wonderful thing because I don't have to go very far. What's your next event?
Probably RE Plus in Anaheim.
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, I might go to that New York one that the CIA does, finance one in March, but I'm still kind of getting life back to normal. And like next weekend, I'm going to visit a project, and so I gotta, be cool with the amount of time that I give to the world, and so that. But yeah, it's that, and then RE Plus.
Mark James asked a question, which is a good question for me, probably not a very good question for you.
Oh.
And Mark's question is, apart from this channel, are there any other YouTube channels that talk about commercial solar that you could recommend? And Mark, unfortunately, I cannot recommend another channel that talks about commercial solar. There are many channels that talk about residential solar, but commercial is somewhat neglected, I think, in the YouTube space. Speaking of YouTube, check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. And we're on audio and video, so give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. Those are the two platforms that garner 90+% of listenership. And then check out our YouTube channel. Just Google it. But there's a link at cleanpowerhour.com to the YouTube channel also. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with our listeners. And if you're coming to Illinois, I want to know you. I'm an expert on the Illinois market. And if you're an EPC, for example, coming to Illinois, because there is a burst of construction work happening in 2024. So developers are actively looking for construction companies who can build stuff in Illinois. If you're doing that, reach out to me. I can help you find resources in Illinois. But how can our listeners find you, Mr. John Weaver?
CommercialSolarGuy.com. That's our website. We just kind of changed it around a little bit to modernize it and clean it up so we can update pages better. And I'm also on LinkedIn, John Fitzgerald Weaver. And but most of the news that I have a new technique, Tim, of collecting news. Instead of posting it on Twitter primarily, I'm now posting it on my website, all these little snippets that I find. And
Good
then
idea.
I'm going to set up my website to send it out to all the places that matter. So I'm going to build a Fediverse website, which hooks up with Mastodon and the new bird one, Blue Sky, and then feeds it to Twitter. So
Yeah.
it's going to be my technique.
And next week on the Clean Power Hour Live on the 29th of February, we're going to have Scott Graybill, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Kalux, which is developing perovskite solar that will be layered on top of traditional crystalline PV technology. So looking forward to interviewing Scott, to meet him at, I can't remember now. It was one of the regionals I was at in the last couple of months, but very interesting. And so perovskites are coming to the solar market. Like, they have pilots in the ground, so it's real, and it's just a question of how quickly the greater solar market will adopt this technology. With that, I'll say thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much,
Yep.
Sean.